Today, we're going to be talking about how clubs can head in a more sustainable future moving forward. So it's a topic that a lot of clubs have reached out to us about because it starts begging the question, well, where do we begin? And we thought it would be none wiser to introduce Adam from Sport Environment Alliance to give a brief introduction about how clubs can move towards this more sustainable future. So, Adam?
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Blake, and welcome to all the CCV members and stakeholders. We're very privileged to be part of this group, and hopefully this is a partnership of many conversations that we have across the journey. By way of introduction, I'm Adam Chain, CEO of Sports Environment Alliance. If you haven't heard of C, as we refer to, we're a not-for-profit member industry organisation. And to put it simply, we strive for climate, environmental and sustainability action through the power of sport. So it doesn't matter if you're a community club or all the way through the elite or a athlete on the podium fighting for gold medals. It plays a role in the systems of climate and environment and how our leadership at the smallest level, at your local club in a committee or as a participant, can be a key driver to what we shape and change in our community. So I'm very happy and privileged to introduce our first speaker, who is Paul Perry from C. He has been a member for several years now. Paul is the founder and owner of Samurai Dojo. So we have a lot of community members also as part of our cohort, and he's also the managing director of Elementary, which specializes in ESG with small to medium enterprise businesses. So Paul brings a unique lens from both a club operator perspective and passionate about the karate industry and sector, but also has the technical expertise. So welcome, Paul. I'll go on mute and over to you.
Thanks, Adam. And thanks for having me, everybody. Again, forgive the camera when it jumps around. It's unfortunately a smart camera, and I think it's picking up my reflection. I'm just going to share my screens, if you'll bear with me a moment. So have we got it all good? Excellent. Okay, great. So again, as Adam mentioned, I run a karate school. I'm actually not in Victoria. I'm based down in the Illawarra, in Thirroul and Wollongong. And again, I suppose I wanted to talk about today just a perspective from my karate club. It's a small club, and I'll go into the details, but just how we've taken steps within our remit and in terms of what we can do, and how we've gone through that journey over the last couple of years. So, as I said, we're based in Thirroul, New South Wales. We've been operating in Australia for 11 years. 6 of those are in Thirroul, and we have about 100 students that are training in the dojo on a weekly basis. We're also part of the Sporting Schools program and Healthy Illawarra program. So we also teach outside of our venue 300 to 400 students every year. We're also proud of a global organization called Kimura Shikoku International, so one of the largest karate bodies in the world. And we're also part of the New South Wales Australian Karate Federations, so recognized internationally as well as domestically. So our sustainability journey, as Adam mentioned, obviously I run an environmental consulting business as well, but keeping it to the scope of the dojo, back in 2022, decided to do an analysis as to where we are. Been running the dojo for a number of years, but wanted to be more socially responsible. Community is a huge part of our dojo. So we wanted to make sure that not only are we teaching the values of martial arts and the self-discipline, but we're also giving back meaningfully, not just the kicking and punching. So where did we start? We decided to do a baseline carbon emissions analysis, just to identify our hotspots. And unsurprisingly, the hotspots ended up being things like electricity, travel, and just our equipment and our merchandise that we use. One of the things we quickly became aware of or just identified was that some of those challenges are beyond our control. So we don't have a full-time location. We use council facilities on a regular basis, and we can't control what electricity providers they use. And when it comes to travel, any sporting club knows this. If you need to go and compete or train, you often have to travel. Zoom's good for some things like these workshops, but competition and sport require a bit of travel. So we decided to focus on what we could influence and the areas within our control as a starting point. And we identified as a club, there were 4 key focus areas. Our merchandise, trying to move away from paper to digital comms, having our procurement process be a bit more responsible, and then some circular economy initiatives. Again, sounds nice and fancy, but what exactly did we do? So from a sustainable initiative, what we changed some of our merchandise providers. So, we've all heard of the terms, fast fashion. So we moved to using AS Color as a garment producer for our tracksuits, for our t-shirts, for our vests. They've got a very clear sustainability journey and transparency on their website, and we've dealt with them in the past. So we know that it is a better choice. Also, the quality is greater. We then went to, how can we change our uniforms? What can we do? So I'm sure you've all seen, some martial arts or clubs have printed labeling all over their uniforms, which is fantastic for marketing. If the student moves or they decide to go to another club for whatever reason, they have to get a whole new uniform. So we've simplified that process by having things like a badge that can be sewn on and taken off. Then, as I mentioned, moving paperless, we looked at the digital communication options for us. So we all know email. We ended up investing in a platform that allows us to send push notifications and have an app for students for them to log in and have a look at what's happening. Again, paper still has its place, but a lot of our comms have moved to digital. And then from the circular economy perspective, we're busy trialing a scheme where used karate uniforms and equipment often get outgrown as kids grow, becomes too small, but the clothing is fantastic. And we offer a resale facility, but we're also looking at taking those uniforms through to less developing areas. So trying to piggyback that onto existing travel arrangements, maybe when I'm going to South Africa or when other people are traveling, and donating those uniforms to less privileged areas. I think overall, the key perspective we've tried to take, those are balancing idealism with practicality. It's okay for us to acknowledge what we can't change straight away. So we rent the spaces. We can't control the lighting. We can't control the waste systems. But it doesn't mean that we can't do anything. Through small, repeatable actions, we've been able to build a bit of momentum. And our approach has very much been, low effort, high impact. Uniform patch system, as I mentioned, it doesn't cost much extra for us, but it actually saves families money if they decide to move, and it reduces waste. And then the donation scheme, which gives us a bit of social impact for the new equipment. Some other lessons, and I suppose themes we've tried to increase and communicate is, I talked about shifting to providers. We prioritize quality. So we want gear and equipment that lasts, even if it's only 20% longer. It reduces the need for frequent replacements. It saves us money. From sustainability, again, our community down here in the Illawarra is very climate conscious. So we haven't had to do much of a sell. But again, we've reframed it. So whilst our merchandise might cost $5 more, $2 more than it did 3 years ago because we've chosen a different provider, it lasts a lot longer. And then support local. We are very fortunate that SMAI, one of the largest martial arts and gym suppliers, happens to be a 10-minute drive from our clubs. So, we're able to literally pick up the equipment ourselves. We reduce shipping costs. It saves us money again. So we've built into what we can control, supporting local and having that chain work through that way. I suppose, what does this mean for other clubs and where they're starting? One of the biggest challenges I think clubs face of any size is it's an overwhelming point. You're going, how am I supposed to do a huge sustainability change? I've got other priorities. And I think my advice to any club is start where you are. You don't need to overhaul the entire club. It can be as simple as 1 or 2 meaningful shifts that start moving the needle. Know your baseline. So get an assessment done, get an analysis of where you are having an environmental impact. Doesn't mean you need to change it all, but just knowing helps inform decisions down the track. Involve your community. parents, students, especially younger students, love being part of these changes. And if you frame it in a way that the sustainable practices are also financial benefits, which are usually they are, you'll get a lot of buy-in. And then be transparent with your stakeholders, acknowledge the limitations, and just try to keep moving forward. So what's next for us? For us as a dojo, us as a karate school. So we want to expand our donation program. So we're going to start opening it up to some more clubs in this area, as well as possibly working with SMAI and some other providers, trying to leverage some of their existing shipping routes. So we try not to increase our carbon footprint just by posting equipment overseas. Sustainable partnerships. So we want to shift all of our gear, all of our consumables to more vetted ethical suppliers. And again, we've got to balance that cost margin. So, there is a pragmatic approach to it. Facility advocacy. So for the next year, this is really a passion project of mine, is going to be working with Wollongong Council to try and improve the recycling schemes, trying to induce the energy efficiency. So even something as simple as allowing us to turn the aircon on and off ourselves, because we have a big hall that we use, and sometimes we don't need that aircon and we're opening doors to get airflow through. So that's, again, small steps that we are trying to take and want to work forward. And then working with other clubs. So we want to work with other clubs, other martial arts schools in the area, who might also be using council facilities to try and push through this advocacy. I suppose taking one more step back and just looking at what is our philosophy. So sustainability, like sport, isn't about perfection. It's about progress. And every step, be it from a sporting perspective, be it from a sustainability perspective, gets us closer to that overall goal. We believe in the principles of discipline, respect, and continued improvement, and that aligns with our environmental stewardship. And which I suppose we're committed, even though we're a relatively small sporting club, to go, even small community organizations can make a meaningful contribution on the sustainability journey. And we don't have to compromise what we're doing. In fact, it often enhances our branding and our positioning to our students and our parents. And yeah, always happy to chat to anyone that wants to find out more about what we've done, and how we've done it, and probably lessons learned. But with that, I will hand back to you, Adam. Let me just figure out how to stop sharing the screen without it losing.
You do that, and that's very fascinating, Paul, and very grateful for your insights. And as you know, with conversations with myself, Paul, I'm now a Taekwondo father and started on the journey, and the circularity of equipment is critical, particularly as it relates to cost, and using kind of the martial arts sector as to where the efficiencies are happening in terms of supply and reuse and repurposing of equipment, particularly from a socioeconomic perspective, but also from its good quality, it can be passed down to other uses. I've been really fascinated to see how this whole new sector of an industry has popped up. So I really enjoy understanding and learning from yourself, and also the local government and the facility space. Us at Sea, we're working tirelessly engaging local government further, because they're a key stakeholder, where 80% of our clubs and venues sit nationally and in Victoria, from your public footy club all the way through the tennis court, down to your martial arts that are on a venue hire agreement, working with other user groups within the community. So they play a critical role in the framework. We'll leave questions, if we have any, until the end, actually, to facilitate some discussion. And those who are on the call, I welcome you to put any questions or even comments that you'd like to share across the journey. We're also welcomed by David on the call as well. And we'll pass to you to close now, David, if you don't mind. I'll introduce Megan from Vic Return and have you to sum us up, David, if that works well for yourself there. So good to see you on the call there. I'll introduce Megan from Vic Return. So many of the stakeholders on this call will know Vic Return as the Victoria's Container Deposit Scheme, and I won't take any of Megan's glory in selling the program, but they have been a fundamental supporter of Sea, particularly in 2025, and really driving the community outcomes of circularity and reuse through this program, and what we can achieve at a community club level from this amazing program where you can get 10 cents yield from every can bottle that fits within the program there. Megan is a bit of a clubs guru, so she's been around as well from leadership roles within RSV, which many of you'll know of, and Vic Sport has been president of Baseball Victoria and also had leadership roles at Football Victoria and Bowls Australia. So Megan brings a real holistic lens and understands the club environment better than anyone I know in this space, and really is able to share a lot from the Container Deposit Scheme initiative. So I'll hand over to you, Megan, and yeah, feel free to share your journey now.
Thanks so much, Adam. And thank you for that lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you and talking all about Victoria's Container Deposit Scheme. Now, I know that some of you may not be in Victoria. Good news is that this program is still available nationwide, with Tasmania just joining on 2 months ago. So that's great news that this information is relevant for all of you across the country, and you'll be able to make some change through your particular scheme. So what we'll talk about today is how you can make a positive impact on the environment while you're fundraising. And Paul, that was great to be able to follow you and your advice there around clubs making a small change and being where you're at. That this is exactly what this program can do for you, is one small step towards your sustainability journey. So over the course of the next few minutes, I'll just talk you through what the scheme is, how you can contribute to a circular economy, and I'll also just give you a slight insight into what actually happens with the bottles and different recycling materials. But I'll just talk you through a little bit about a plastic bottle and why that journey is important, and then very importantly, how you can then make some dollars for your club. So what is a container deposit scheme? It was set up as a litter reduction and a recycling program, and basically you get 10 cents for every bottle, can, container that is eligible within the scheme. There's a wonderful app that I've just learned about, which is called the Litter Stopper app, and what the data is showing us is that during beach cleanups, which happen quite frequently by groups such as Landcare, beach cleanups have found that the number of eligible items within the scheme has actually dropped by half. So that's quite considerable, and demonstrating how successful the CDS has been in Victoria, and I'm only speaking about Victoria numbers, but how successful it has been to actually change behaviours on the ground. So I'm a sports administrator. Learning about waste management has been really interesting and a new and completely new territory for me. What I'm finding really interesting is that there's been a really big shift around how we as a nation think about waste. So it's been quite linear in the approach. So we take things from the earth, the ground, wherever, we make it into things, and then we dispose of them. Now, what that means is that it's not very sustainable. So we're shifting now to mostly circular thinking, and the circular economy is the other term that is usually used. It then creates this opportunity where we've got drink containers that just are able to be recycled into materials. Sorry, apologies, I thought I'd turn that off. Technology is not my strong suit. And so what we're able to do there is, through the scheme, is be able to recycle those items over and over again, so becoming a more circular economy. 2 billion containers have been recycled through the scheme since November 2023, which that number is just mind-boggling to me, but it demonstrates how much Victorians are focused on sustainability. So very briefly, I'll just give you a quick overview of why there's a big difference between how bottles and containers are recycled through the CDS as opposed to a yellow bin. Yellow bins still play a really important role. There's a number of containers or ineligible items that will go through yellow bins. However, when they do go through that process, they do often have other contaminants within the bin. So people might put in half-eaten pizza in the pizza box and it's still in the recycle bin. So that means that it needs to use more energy and water in order for it to be at a level where it can be recycled again. So it's obviously not as sustainable as this process where it is purely containers through the scheme. So after the containers are deposited through the scheme, the plastic, and we'll just talk about plastic today, the plastic containers are chopped into flakes. And so they're broken up into this middle bottle here, and they're melted down and turned into tiny pellets, I guess they're probably best described as. And they're then reshaped into something that looks like a test tube, really. It's called a preform. And through some sort of scientific miracle, it gets blown into a new bottle. It's a pretty cool process. And I have actually been out to what's called a material recycling facility, a MRF, and looked at actually the clean stream of recycling through the CDS, and then what comes through yellow bins, and it is noticeably cleaner. It's very visible in these large pallets that you can see that it does make a big difference in terms of having a clean stream of recycling. A process that I find incredibly fascinating. So what can be returned? There's, I think, a lot of questions about, well, what's eligible, what's ineligible. Check for the 10-cent mark. That's always a helpful guide. Things like water bottles, Gatorade bottles that you'll have, I'm sure, in abundance at your club, aluminium cans, glass bottles are all eligible throughout the scheme. There is a tracker on our website, so if you're not sure, you can have a look at the particular item that you're looking for. Milk cartons, wine, cordial bottles are not eligible through the scheme. And remembering, going back to the initial purpose of the scheme, which is litter reduction, those items are often consumed in the home and therefore easily placed into a yellow bin. So here's the crux of what I'm sure you're all wanting me to talk about today is how can you actually raise some money while doing good for the environment? Well, I could tell you more about it, or Tom de Koning and Darcy Vesio from the Carlton Football Club could tell you a little bit more, and let's hear from them. Go that way.
It's easy to level up your fundraising with Victoria's Container Deposit Scheme.
Let people know what you're doing with posters around the club rooms and grounds.
Put your container bins in the right places, next to red bins.
Share your donation ID so your supporters can donate their refunds to you.
And post about your fundraising on social media.
Let's work together.
And turn containers into cash for your club.
So I couldn't have said it better myself. And what I thought would be really helpful to you is just to go through just a very quick checklist of items that you might then find really helpful to get started. There's recycling and fundraising in this way is new to sport in Victoria in particular. It's certainly old hat in other states and territories across the mainland. But what I thought I'd do is just break it down into some really bite-sized chunks. You can donate what we call a donation partner ID, and that means that when individuals are dropping their containers off at a machine or a depot, they can actually donate their refunds to your organisation, which I think is really beautiful. There's a lot of individuals who might say, you know what, 10-cent refund, that's not really worth my while, but it might be $3 or $4 that they're doing and contributing, but you might get many members of the community then donating to your cause, and therefore that all adds up. So that's a nice passive way for you to achieve some income, and you can do that through the donation partner ID, which means that the income goes directly to your organisation's bank account. I always highly recommend that clubs set a fundraising goal. We all know with our sporting on-field prowess that if you don't set a goal or a target of what your PB is, it's always harder to achieve. But by setting a goal and explaining to your community what you're fundraising for, it means that your club can then, just really galvanise the community around that. We've had Alexandra Football Netball Club have galvanised their community, and last year they actually didn't have to pay for uniforms for this season. So the funds that they raised last year meant that the whole club from junior to seniors didn't have to pay for uniforms, which again, that's a beautiful thing in this cost of living crisis, to be able to do something that's really tangible and supporting your community. So choose your CDS Vic fundraising coordinator. Now, you can call them anything. They might be a sustainability coordinator or whatnot, but just having someone that leads and coordinates your collection efforts. So is that you have the yellow bin items that you previously would have collected? Do they go into a separate bin or a separate vessel? It might just be a cardboard box that they're placed into, but who's responsible for taking that down to a depot or to a machine to deposit? So just being clear as to who's actually driving that process for you. And there's a number of ways that you can fundraise with the scheme. And here's just a couple of things, food for thought for you. So it's whether or not the items that are currently in your yellow bin, and focusing in on depositing those items and moving them away from the yellow bin process and earning some funds in that way. Engaging your team members and supporters to receive donations. So through the donation partner ID, and being able to receive those funds just organically straight into your bank account. But also potentially then, as you grow and develop, you might want to be a little bit more innovative and partner with club sponsors and local businesses for them to donate their containers. We know that times are tough, and local pubs and cafes may not necessarily be sponsoring your local club to the same level that they previously did, but potentially it could be a reduction in their cash sponsorship, but it might be that you get a portion of their refund through the CDS. So I know that would add up pretty quickly if you partnered up with the local pub, for instance. So it's just thinking a little bit laterally about this. Actually can be some good a good fundraiser and a good way to compromise in a challenging financial time for businesses. And I guess it's tell people that you're fundraising. So we have a number of social media tiles, some posters, and some great assets there that you can basically copy, paste, add some detail about what you're fundraising for, and tell people all about it. We've got some great initiatives out in the wild. As I love, we do play a game here where you see the branding or someone collecting out in the wild, and we love sharing that information. It's great to see where you go to a local club and they're fundraising for whether it be equipment or to help with the cost of participation, just subs and regos, uniforms. There's so many things that this can contribute to. So thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you today. Great to be part of C and the wonderful work that they do, and looking forward to having a chat at the end with some questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. And David, I'll let you start sharing your screen, and I'll just go through a bit of a recap, then give you an intro if that's helpful at your end. Megan, as you know, I love this program, and it's a great supporter of C, and you're supporting our members with pilots, which we understand with AFL and tennis, and what you did at the Australian Open in terms of educating through literally people telling you where to put stuff in the bin. It's a behavioural change thing, and I think it's just going to get more and more ingrained into our community clubs. And we sit in a position where we see this across Australia, and I can talk about my child's school, where I think they've raised $3,000 through the PNC, literally organising a drop-off of parents to put in containers. And I use that as an example to go, imagine what that could do to a local sporting club, as you said, with uniforms, or sponsoring an athlete on a national tour or whatever it may be. So yeah, please take the time to look at those resources. And C is proud to be a proud partner with Victoria's Container Deposit Scheme. And it's a program in which, everyone just seems to love it. So it's one of our favourites. Next on our agenda, so we've gone from a community club to kind of a government industry program, and now we're off to the kind of consulting business sector. So I'd like to welcome David Cox, who is the Director of Growth at MRA Consulting. MRA Consulting are experts in waste, reuse, recovery, tech, climate change, sustainability and development. And David also comes from a background with Sustainability Victoria and incredible experience in the waste sector. So very privileged and thankful for David giving up his time and insights, because without the experts in the field and those who are actually doing, our journey can only go so far. So yeah, really take in the learnings of David and insights, and I'll pass over to you, David. So thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I assume you can all see the screen. It's come through okay. Fantastic. Thank you for that. It's a real privilege to be here, and thanks for the invite to come and have a talk. What I thought we would do here is just come back a level and just sort of look at a national level, look at where we are as a country in terms of our journey to improve waste and recycling and to strive towards a circular economy, and just reflect on some of those points and hopefully elaborate through the panel session later on in terms of some questions and how that might relate to yourselves. So I put together a few slides just about where the state of waste actually is in Australia at the moment, and thought, well, where's the best place to start? Let's really start at what the national targets are. Now, I imagine a number of you are probably quite familiar with these, and I've just highlighted a couple that I think are really, really significant. And that is some targets around trying to reduce the amount of waste that's generated per person, so actually consuming less or generating less waste, increasing our recycling rates, and we've got some really clear national targets for quite aggressive recycling rates, up around 80%. We've got some specific targets around organic waste, so food waste, around halving the amount that's sent to landfill by 2030, and a couple of ancillary targets that really support other activities around the use of plastics and design materials and products and that sort of thing. But I guess the key takeaways from a waste and recycling sector and the drivers of that circular economy are that reduction in waste generation, that increase in recycling, and that specific piece around food organics, which is this prevalent problem that's sort of staying within the system. Just make a note there that whilst this was released back in 2018, where we've got this reduction in waste generation, now actually what we've seen to date has been an increase in waste generation. So there are challenges here, and I thought I'd just sort of contextualize that in terms of, historically, where were we at? What was waste generation looking like back in 1996 when we started collecting a good data set around here? And what does it look like now? We've tripled the amount of waste we generate. My population's increased, our economy's increased. The amount of material that we're actually sending to landfill is about the same. And that gap, that 40 million tonne gap, has been filled by recycling activities. Let's cast our eyes forward a little bit. And let's see where we're likely to be at 2030. If we keep growing waste at the rate that we have to date, cast our eyes forward to 2030, we'll be generating 70 million tonnes. If we hit the 80% national targets, there'll be about 40 million tonnes going to landfill, and we need this huge growth in recycling infrastructure and capacity, about 80 million tonnes per year grown over that period too. So there's a really big job to be done in that, improving the recycling infrastructure, and sitting behind that is the activities that businesses undertake and that households undertake and that governments undertake, such as putting in place source separated collection systems, looking at the necessity to consume certain materials and reducing waste, and presenting material in a fashion that it can be recycled by the sector. Just what do those numbers look like? This is sort of, if you look at the total waste that's being generated and the trend data, and this is just taking history and casting it forward, looking at where our recycling has been slowly increasing. The challenge we've got here is how do we improve those recycling rates so that we can impact the landfill rate. And this is just looking forward to where we are relative to the target. So there's a lot of work that's yet to be done. And there's some activities there that in different jurisdictions that are making really quite big inroads. For example, we're seeing increased recovery of material for recovery of energy in WA, the implementation of waste to energy over there, and we're seeing capacity across different sectors and target materials to improve the recovery of those materials. But there's a long way to go. So unfortunately, 56 years to get to the national target. So we do need to step up, both as waste generators, C&I businesses, stadium operators, households, and industry needs to also build its capacity in order to recover more materials. One of the things we often get asked and talk and is a real key topic of conversation for those looking at the policy sitting behind driving economic behaviour is what's going on with landfill levies. Those that are in Victoria and New South Wales will be very familiar, and South Australia will be very familiar with levies. Queensland's had levies reintroduced into the last couple of years, so obviously that's driving change in that market as well, or that jurisdiction as well. What we look at it is, from our perspective, is that the levy really creates economic headroom for recycling activity to occur. So on the premise that most recycling has to be funded, in that the value of the materials doesn't cover the cost of recycling it. There are some exceptions: metals, cardboard. The value inherent in those materials is enough to cover the cost of recycling. There's a whole range of materials that we need some economic headroom, otherwise people will send it to landfill, and that's what the role that levy plays. So I've put a circle around some of those sort of target materials and organics and or concrete. Not so much these days because there's a real drive for using in construction applications. There's some large tonnage target materials sitting in the middle there that levies can do a really good job of driving into the recycling sector. And then we've got all this stuff on the right-hand side that it doesn't. And the reason for it is it's not large volume, so it's not impacted by the levies, and it's expensive to put through processes. And for those sorts of materials, we need different policy interventions. And for example, we've had the conversation around the container deposit scheme and how it drives the recovery of plastic and other containers. That's a really good example of another policy intervention there that is supporting the recovery of material using some other mechanism other than the waste levies. So it's not all about recycling. It's not all about waste generation. The circular economy, from our perspective, has a whole range of elements and activities. Some within our scope of control and some without. And I guess as those that are generating waste in the commercial sector or operating businesses or running not-for-profits or operating stadiums, for example, the material has already probably been designed and the packaging is coming as it's coming, but there's some decisions you can make around procurement to ensure that you're fostering the use of materials that is able to be recovered. But there are all these aspects of the circular economy there that need to be looked at. And one of the things that really stands out to us also is that ability to reuse material as well, which is often overlooked, where we sort of think, well, we'll design something to be recycled, we'll put in place the systems, but what about reuse? And that's a really hard nut to crack. So I think just on that reuse and that repair and refill, I think this is a big opportunity that we're yet to explore, and we're yet to crack this nut in the commercial setting. We're seeing, activities at household levels. We see op shops, we see take-backs of materials for reuse in that perspective. But there really needs to be a bit of focus in the government policy space, expanding extended producer responsibility schemes. Obviously, we think levies always help drive recycling, also drive behaviour, also up the reuse avenue, but also looking at policies that support businesses to support these sorts of activities, and whether that be tax incentives for the use of reuse of materials or use of recycled content. There's sort of a couple of examples that might sit there. There's a whole heap of other aspects to repair and reuse around repairability indexes, and there's some really good examples of where other jurisdictions in Europe have applied this to products, and you can make purchasing decisions based on as a consumer, but also as a business based on these indexes. We really look to see the national targets to set some sort of framework around here and put some strength in and around behind those reuse and repair targets, and also the right to repair when it comes to electronic goods or complex mechanical equipment, or even vehicles, motor vehicles, having that right to access and to repair and to get something that is no longer working back into good working order. Okay, so that I'll finish up there and really leave anything that you might have to ask for the panel session, but just hoping that sort of gives you a bit of a context on where we see things from the national perspective, the challenges we've got ahead of us in terms of closing that gap for the 2030 national targets, and give you a bit of a flavour for some of the policy interventions, and primarily it's levy and the CDS schemes that are being implemented by the states. Thanks, Adam.
Oh, that's great, David. Thank you very much. And I was just reflecting on some of the points you were raising out there with policy mechanisms and those elements being critical in what we need to do as an industry to support clubs and the volunteers at a grassroots, because a lot of burden falls onto our grassroots clubs and communities across every bit of legislative framework. And that's a lot of work that we're working with consultants such as yourself, David, and the industry as to how we can lead and advocate in terms of policy mechanisms. And CDS is a great example as to where government is making action starting in SANT back in the day, and now it's a national scheme that's just almost part of the fabric of what we do. And the repair and reuse element, I think that is just, as we go to circularity and heading towards Brisbane 2032, circularity is a topic that's very much getting on the agenda, from building materials to equipment. It's going to be a fascinating space. So really grateful for providing your academic and industry insights, David. And I learned a lot of interesting information there myself that I wasn't across in the waste sector. We've got a bit of time for discussions here, Blake, don't we? So we've got a Q&A open and also the chat. I would like to, what I'll do, I can go to the first question in the chat, but if anyone else from the panel has any final comments or questions after this question, feel free to unmute yourself and start the discussion from any insights you've come from a speaker's lens in particular where you found interesting. But the first one's to Megan, and this is probably part of the system framework, is why wine bottles? We probably got a very popular consumable out there in our community clubs, particularly after a committee meeting sometimes. So what's the story and what's the plans with these other hard to process items at the moment in the Victorian context?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And a question we do get repeatedly. So wine bottles, spirit bottles, and also milk bottles are not eligible within the scheme. And the whole premise of the scheme was around litter reduction. And so they are traditionally not items that are consumed out of the home and are easily then recycled through your yellow bin. And so they are not eligible through the scheme. So please keep popping them into your yellow bin. I think it goes to, I always try and explain to people that the best way that we can recycle is by not recycle these kinds of containers is by ensuring that we're not putting food scraps or other things into that yellow bin so that it is as clean a stream of recycling as possible. Unfortunately, I have been to one of the dumps that then receives all of the yellow bins, and it is phenomenal what people actually put in it. Car batteries. I saw a basketball actually come out of one of the trucks. I was like, okay, cool. I think I see the premise of trying to recycle it, and I think the intent might be positive, but it doesn't help, obviously, creating that clean stream of recycling. So yes, so wine and spirit bottles and milk bottles are not eligible in the scheme because they can be, they are primarily consumed at home. But thanks for the question.
Perfect. And I'll go to Paul and Blake, feel free to jump in if anything comes to mind from a CCP perspective as well. But the relationship with local governments, you touched on that, Paul, and I think we really can't understate how much that differs between LGA to LGA and sport and rec officer to tenure, responsibility to department. Kind of where are you seeing the innovation and changes and adaptability? You were talking about taking it into your own hands in terms of power consumption and editing. Like, where is a user group that's got a specific time block during the week? Where are you seeing innovation across this space, or what's the ideal to give the power back to you as the user group and facility operator during that period?
Again, great question. As I said a bit earlier, I suppose I'm very fortunate with my LGA down here, down in Wollongong and the Illawarra. It's very proactive when it comes to community, and they want to partner with their users. So Wollongong have a strategy for their sustainability future, and I suppose what is within my power is to go to them and say, I'm also on a similar journey. Again, it's everything adds up. So I use the facility for 14 hours a week. There's other little kickers use it for a couple of hours a week. And when you start adding up each of those small users relatively, our behavior and our pattern makes a change. And I think when I was talking, the example of the air conditioning. Sometimes it gets too hot and the aircon is just an automatic timer. So someone in procurement has made a decision that there is a good service provider and that aircon is just going to run from 9 to 5 with after-hour switches, which is great if you're sitting in an office and you're not moving. But if you're using a facility that's got a lot of activity in it and we've got to crank open the windows, not only are we not using the aircon, we're actually probably making it worse. And then it's a case of having that conversation. And if that's happening in our area, it's happening to the facility down the road, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the biggest challenge, and again, I'm talking to other martial arts groups, because again, a lot of us use community facilities. Because again, if everyone's got a similar challenge, it's not that the council isn't interested, it's just they may not be aware that, I'm cranking the windows open, not to be disruptive, but because I need airflow. And so it's literally just having that conversation and probably having a spokesperson. Again, I'm fortunate in that I speak both languages from an environmental science perspective as well as a sports club. But it's just, everybody wins. And I think that's I suppose my big setback is it's a pragmatic approach. And it's just a case of, it's not a negative, it's not a cost. It's just, hey, did you know that I'm opening the windows and you actually don't need the aircon running?
Yeah. It's so simple. And I just think those who are passionate about our environment and even the small changes, it can be a real bugbear for those who are trying to just make the smallest change. So I love that insight, Paul. It probably gives a lot of comfort to people listening into this as they're taking in this session in their own time. Yeah. But Blake, did you have anything from a CCV perspective? I've done a bit of talking here. I'll throw it back over to you there.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for leading the way there, Adam. I'd just like to say that even with Paul's presentation about what clubs can be doing for their sustainability journey, is to not look at it on a large scale, but just to have those small incremental changes that the club can be doing. At CCV, as part of our awards nights and gala dinner, we have a sustainability initiative. And one of the clubs reached out to us last week and said, this is awesome, but where do I begin? And I sent through what the winning club did to receive the sustainability initiative. And they came back and said, oh, they must have a bit of money to be able to do that, because they had waste masters, glass crushers, recycled water, irrigation system. But then they shared their story about what they're doing. And they have something simple as they have goats on their golf course that chop out some of the weeds, and that is massive help. And all you can do is really start small on your scale. And especially for CCV's perspective is a lot of clubs have a large membership base. Encourage them to partake in your sustainability journey as well. And by utilizing the CDS scheme and as a bit of a fundraising initiative for your members as well. And lastly, especially with the network of community clubs, clubs like to help out other clubs. So by all means, reach out to the clubs that are in your LGA to make a unified front to impact your sustainability journey as well. That's pretty much all I've got on my notes here. But I can't see any other questions in the chat. I see Megan has responded to Brendan about the CDS scheme, which is another awesome initiative and a prime example of why the CDS scheme is so great. But if anyone else has any other questions, by all means, feel free to reach out to the team here at CCV, and we'll send a copy of this recording with the slides as well, and all of the contacts from the presenters today. So without further ado, thank you guys for all attending, and I'd just like to say a special thank you to all of the attendees for presenting today.
Thank you, and reciprocate that. And And David, thank you for your time. Megan and Paul, those insights are incredibly valuable. So I can't reiterate enough. Please reach out to the network. That's what we are as a community. And we share and learn, and follow us on LinkedIn and share stories or just the good news like was in the chat. We just love it. So just keep it coming. We're all in it together. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.